Who doesn't love dragons, right? I mean, these are massive flying creatures that can even breathe fire. We know they are intelligent creatures, but some maesters even believe they are smarter than humans, being able to show affection towards their friends and hatred towards their enemies. In this video, we are back to Game of Thrones and we will be naming and describing all Targaryen dragons for you. So sit back and enjoy. Balerion, also known as Balerion the Black Dread, the biggest and the fiercest, this was the dragon ridden by Aegon the Conqueror during the War of Conquest. Balerion was also one of the 3 dragons belonging to House Targaryen prior to the War of Conquest, named after one of the old gods of Valyria, and was the only one who survived until the War of Conquest. He was so large that it was said his shadow could swallow an entire town when he took flight. Meraxes. This beast was one of the main weapons used by Aegon in his conquest of Westeros. Smaller than Balerion and also named after one of the gods of Valyria, her scales were silver and eyes were golden. Ridden by Rhaenys Targaryen during the War of Conquest, Meraxes was said to be capable of swallowing an entire horse. Her egg hatched on Dragonstone during the Century of Blood but met her end during a campaign in Dorne when an iron bolt from a scorpion went through her eye. Vhagar. This is another she-dragon and was ridden by Queen Visenya Targaryen during Aegon's conquest. She was a huge and ferocious dragon at the time of the Dance of the Dragons and the deaths of Balerion and Meraxes. Vhagar was one of the largest dragons in existence. Her roar was one of the most fearsome of any of her kind and was also named after one of the gods of Valyria. She was 181 years old when she died. Quicksilver. Quicksilver's fireballs were pale white in color and was a dragon ridden by King Aenys Targaryen and later by his son Aegon Targaryen. Being a quarter of the size of Balerion, she perished alongside her rider at the hands of Balerion and Maegor the Cruel during the battle beneath God's Eye. Dreamfire. Dreamfire was a she-dragon ridden by Princess Rhaena Targaryen and later by Princess Helaena Targaryen. This slender she-dragon was hatched during the reign of King Aegon I Targaryen and was killed during the storming of the Dragon Pit. Vermithor. Also called the Bronze Fury, Vermithor was a mature male dragon once ridden by King Jaehaerys I Targaryen, which upon his death was ridden by Hugh Hammer. Described as a bronze dragon with great tan wings, he was large but smaller than Balerion and Vhagar. Due to his size, he was not as nimble in the air as some of the smaller, younger dragons and therefore sadly died during the Second Battle of Tumbleton. Silverwing. Ridden by Queen Alysanne Targaryen, this dragon got a name from her color. Silverwing refused to be ridden after the passing of Queen Alysanne and remained in a semi-wild state for decades until she was retamed by the Dragon Seed, one of the 2 betrayers, Ulfhate, and was one of the dragons still alive at the end of the Dance of the Dragons. Tessarion. This she-dragon was also known as the Blue Queen and was ridden by Prince Daeron Targaryen. Her wings were a dark cobalt, while her claws, crest, and belly scales were a bright beaten copper in color. Her flames were also cobalt in color. Fighting in the Second Battle of Tumbleton, this wounded dragon was slain by 3 arrows where she met her end. Caraxes. A veteran of many battles, he was nicknamed the Bloodworm and was ridden by Prince Daemon Targaryen during the Dance of the Dragons. Caraxes was red in color and was huge and lean. Formidable, fearsome, and experienced, he was about half the size of the huge Vhagar. He sadly met his end in front of the walls of Harrenhal. Sunfire. This was a splendid young male dragon ridden by King Aegon II Targaryen and was also known as Sunfire the Golden. Described as the most beautiful dragon ever seen, Sunfire had gleaming gold scales, pale pink wing membranes with golden flames. He survived the dance of the dragons only to succumb to his wounds weeks later. Arax. This young yet mature dragon was ridden by Prince Lucerys Velaryon during the Dance of the Dragons. Arax and his rider were slain by Prince Aemond Targaryen and Vhagar in the skies over Shipbreaker Bay, and 3 days later the dragon's head and neck washed up beneath the cliffs below Storm's End along with Prince Lucerys' corpse. The Cannibal. Black as coal with menacing green eyes, the Cannibal was a wild dragon that lived on Dragonstone during the Dance of the Dragons. Feasting on dead dragons, newborn dragons, and dragon eggs, he was the largest and oldest of the wild dragons. He survived the Dance of the Dragons but vanished after the war. Grey Ghost. This wild dragon dwelt in a smoking vent high on the desolate eastern side of the volcano called Dragonmont and was pale grey-white in color, kinda like the color of morning mist. He was never claimed nor ridden and is one of the 3 wild dragons with Sheep Stealer and the Cannibal. Grey Ghost was killed and partially devoured by Sunfire upon his return to Dragonstone. Syrax. Ridden solely by Rhaenyra Targaryen, this she-dragon's name came from a goddess of Valyria. She was huge and formidable and had yellow scales. Chained in the King's Landing, killed in the aftermath of the storming of the Dragon Pit. Moon Dancer. Ridden by Lady Baela Targaryen, she was a slender pale green dragon with her horns, crest and wing bones pearl-colored. During a fight with Sunfire, Moon Dancer was blinded when a blast of Sunfire's flames hit her directly in the eyes, and the younger dragon was eventually killed. Morgul. This dragon was also never ridden but was bound to Princess Jaehaera Targaryen before the Dance of the Dragons. Morgul, like most dragons, also died in the storming of the Dragon Pit. Stormcloud. This young male dragon was bonded with Aegon III at the start of the Dance of the Dragons, and he met his end in the same. Shrykos. This never-ridden young she-male dragon was bound to King Jaehaerys Targaryen during the Dance of the Dragons. She died in the Dragon Pit when it was invaded by a half-crazed angry mob after a one-handed prophet called the Shepherd began to rant against all dragons everywhere. Vermax. This male dragon was ridden by Prince Jaehaerys Velaryon, thriving and growing bigger by the year. This dragon was killed during the battle in the Gullet by crashing down into the sea, but somehow different tales are told about how Vermax fell. Sea Smoke. This dragon was the pride and passion of Laenor Velaryon. After his death, Adam of Hull was able to claim and ride it. During the Second Battle of Tumbleton, Vermithor killed Sea Smoke by locking his teeth into his neck and ripping his head off. Meleys. Ridden by Prince Alyssa Targaryen, this is an old she-dragon also called, with scarlet scales and pink membranes on her wings and her crest, horns and claws as bright as copper. She was considered to be one of the swiftest dragons in Westeros but was killed by Vhagar and Sunfire in the siege of Rook's Rest. Morning. Belonging to Lady Rhaena Targaryen, this she-dragon hatched during the Dance of the Dragons. Morning's scales were pale pink but with black horns and crest. It was one of the 4 dragons to survive the Dance of the Dragons and the only one still controlled by the Targaryens. Tyraxis. Slightly smaller than Vermax or Arax, Tyraxis was still pretty young during the Dance of the Dragons. Prince Joffrey Velaryon was its rider, but it was only recently able to fly long distances with a rider and not quite big enough for a combat yet. Tyraxis was the 3rd dragon to die in the pit when it was invaded by a half-crazed angry mob. Sheep Stealer. With an ugly mud brown in color, He was not aggressive towards humans, but when provoked, he could be vicious and ill-tempered. This wild dragon was tamed by a girl named Nettle, and after certain instances with Rhaenyra Targaryen, Nettles and Sheep Stealer disappeared, never to be seen again. The Last Dragon. This Targaryen dragon died more than a century before Robert's rebellion, during the reign of Aegon III Targaryen, marking the extinction of dragons in Westeros. And that is all, guys. Thanks for watching, and do not forget to tell us what you thought of the video in the comment section down below. For more related videos, do check our channel out, and do not forget to support us by liking our videos and subscribing to the channel. Till then, this is Halabella, and see you soon in our next video.